Welcome in, everyone, to another special edition of AYS Sports. I am your host, Blake Ruffino. We are here yet again with our good friends over at Service Hawk Digital Media, where they soar above the competition. If you're an HVAC work, electrical pro, generator pro, if you need to run your business, you need to get those ads out. You need a great and the best, one of the best marketing teams and systems in the entire state of Louisiana. You need to go over to our good friends over at Service Hawk Digital Marketing and Service Hawk Digital Media. We are here with them. Just got done talking with Justin and Lee. Guys are killing it, man. Some of the top, if not the top, in all of 225 and 985, and the awards that these guys are winning over here absolutely are showing that. Good to be back. We were off last week. We are back here again this week, and you know, if you've seen any of these episodes, we love to come in here and kind of spice some things up, go into a little bit more detail than what we do on our normal shows. You know, in our live shows, we come in here and we talk a lot about in the live shows giving big bullet points. When we come to Service Talk and we do these, and I love these special episodes, we kind of dive more into the weeds. And today, I really want to dive into the weeds of what we've been doing the entire week. So there's no real sports going on. The ESPYs were on last night, which signifies that no sports had any games on last night. But the big thing that we had, especially as we follow LSU and especially as we follow the SEC, has been SEC Media Days. And I think a big question that has come from SEC Media Days, along with our angle that we're going to bring this into LSU, is how deep that this conference is going to be and the teams that are in this conference and how deep the conference runs. You know, today I was getting ready for this episode. I was getting ready to talk about a lot of specific things on what is going to make the SEC maybe not the best conference in the country, even though I still think that they will at the end of the day be the best conference in the country. But I started putting the 16 teams into tiers. And in those tiers, just how deep can this conference be? You know, in tier one, I think that there's like 4 teams, as an example, that I think have the chance to not only win the conference, but could be a bona fide playoff team. I look at the 4 teams on top of the conference right now that I would expect, if you told me right now in the beginning of the season, these 4 teams are going to make the playoff, I could fully see it happening, and I could fully see this going in. And LSU is in one of those realms. LSU is in that circle. I think as we start getting into SEC Media Days and we pre-look at what is going to happen through the season, as we look at who are some of the best teams in the conference, guys, I have 9 teams that I believe in the conference of 16. So over half of these teams, number one, could either make the playoffs or going to find themselves on the outside looking in to the college football playoff in the 12-team format. You know, in the tier one of the 4 best teams that I think that the SEC has this year, I look at Texas, I look at Georgia, I look at Bama, and I look at LSU. I look at the chalk. The teams that normally are there and that have been there and have done that, I think those teams all have 3 massive things in common. Number one, I think that they have recruited well. I look at LSU as the outlier of what the other 3 teams did in reference to the talent and how they acquired the talent. Like, I look at LSU in a sense of, well, you go out offensively, you get 2 big-time offensive linemen from the portal. You've recruited multiple 5-stars along your offensive line. Weston Davis, Kencarius Kern get in that mix. Can Solomon Thomas get into that mix? The number 1 interior offensive lineman in the country coming in to LSU from last season out of the high school ranks. I look at Barry and Brown. I look at Nick Anderson, who's been cleared to go for action. I think of Garrett Nussmeier going into year 2. Majority of those pieces outside of Garrett Nussmeier are from the portal. I think of Aaron Anderson, who might be your leading receiver. Guys, he's from the state of Louisiana. You technically acquired him from Alabama from the portal. So your big weapons on the outside, your big weapon, and Chris Hilton is the only guy there that is going to be from recruiting from within. Regardless of all of that, I think that those 4 teams, specifically LSU, that's getting a lot of play and a lot of pub here, through SEC Media Days that those are your 4 teams that I think that can make the playoff, or not even think. The 4 teams of Texas, Georgia, Bama, and LSU are the teams that right now, if you ask me in the beginning of the season, I think that will make the playoff or have the potential to make the playoff. Maybe one of those teams is on the outside looking in, like it was last year for the SEC. Where I think that the SEC, though, is so deep is I think that more than half of the league, either number 1 is going to make the conference, or number 2, as I mentioned, be on the outside looking in. I think of the teams in what I would call a tier 2: Florida, A&M, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri. Guys, the league in the top half of it versus the middle half of it, meaning tier 2, might make it where the SEC starts to separate. Now, if you're from an LSU angle and you think about this, you don't play Texas and Georgia. You do play Bama, but you do play Florida. You do play A&M. You do play South Carolina. You do play Ole Miss. You do play Arkansas and Oklahoma that some think that it could be in that tier 2 to tier 3 category, along with Vanderbilt, which a lot of people think could be in that tier 2 to tier 3 category as well. When I look at LSU and I look at the SEC as a whole, guys, I don't think with the schedule that you have and with the teams and quarterbacks that you face off against that you can take this schedule lightly. Guys, I look at these 9 teams in the tier 1 to tier 2 and say to myself, the quarterback play is there. The overall talent level is there. You know, I think that people have, for whatever reason, somewhat discredited Georgia to some of the things that they've done in the offseason, and along with Alabama and LSU. Guys, the depth of this conference and what LSU goes into going into the season, it's going to be a whirlwind of emotions, and it's a very tough schedule to go about. Let's stick with LSU here in the tier 2 to tier 1. Guys, in your schedule, as we mentioned, you face Florida, you face A&M, you face South Carolina, you face Ole Miss, you face Alabama, you face Arkansas, you face Vanderbilt, you face Oklahoma. There's been a lot made at SEC Media Days this week about the SEC going to a 9-game conference schedule versus staying at 8. And I got to ask the God's honest question of this. When you look at a team like LSU, who, yes, they don't have to play Texas or Georgia, arguably the 2 top teams in the SEC, would anybody in the Big Ten want to change schedules with LSU when you got to face off, as we read it off again, Bama, Florida, A&M, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Missouri. I mean, they don't have Missouri, excuse me. Ole Miss, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. When I look at those teams, and I specifically look at those quarterbacks, I think of John Mateer, Diego Pavia, who, yes, even though I'm not necessarily a massive fan of, but it's not like that he is a scrub. I think of Taylor Green in Arkansas. Is Austin Simmons going to live up to the hype that a lot of us think that he could live up to after the drive that he had last year versus Georgia? Lenora Sellers. Does Marcel Reed at A&M take a massive leap in year 2 as a starter? DJ Lagway, one of the, if not one of the most talented quarterbacks, not only in the SEC, but the conference. And then Bama in year 2 under Kalen DeBoer with Ty Simpson, pretty much as Kalen DeBoer this week has come out and said that he is going to be their starting quarterback if they started off the season today. Guys, that is a brutal schedule. Guys, I think last year, for what it's worth, the SEC, from a lot of people, clarified it as being down. And that very well may be the case. But I look at this year and going into this season and all of the really, really talented quarterbacks that you have, along with all of the depth that the SEC has, and now going into a season with just elite quarterback play that you are bringing in. Guys, I don't know, number one, if anybody in this league could go undefeated. And number two, I think that you potentially, of the 16 teams that you have in this conference, 9 of them have a realistic chance to be at the end there on the outside looking excuse me, on the outside looking in. I do think a team like Missouri might be stretching it a little bit. You bring in Bo Prabula from Penn State. Maybe 9 is pushing it. Because even if you're talking about 7 to 8 teams that at the end of this are playoff contenders, national championship contenders, and or playoff contenders in the sense of that they're outside looking in, guys, you have to play almost half of them. Half of them, actually 2/3 of them, is on LSU's schedule. We're going to see how all of this plays out. But where I think the SEC separates itself is the quarterback play. Now, Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU quarterback, has gotten a lot of play this week in SEC Media Days, and he deserves to get the play that he's gotten because, look, there was a lot of things that Garrett did at a high level. There were some things and that he didn't do at a high level that he needs to correct. The maturity level, though, in listening to guys like Arch Manning, Gunnar Stockton, Lenora Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, DJ Lagway, Austin Simmons, guys, quarterback play in college will always be at a paramount. It will always be the biggest thing that can separate you. I think that when I look at these teams and I look at your schedule, guys, when you say, you come out here and you say, listen, I think LSU can go floor 9-3, 8-4. I don't think they'll get there. I think floor 9-3, ceiling maybe 9-1. But when you look at saying, hey, when I look at SEC Media Days and we start giving projections or predictions of where these teams are going to go and what they're going to do, 10-2 for LSU is not a small feat. When you look at the conference the way that it is, and as stacked as it always is, guys, 10-2, you got to go through a gauntlet of teams to get there. That is not a shot at Brian Kelly or this team or how good that they could be. You know, I think of 2023, you're a game away from doing that. You were 9-3 in that season because you played the ACC champion in Florida State. But if you don't play them in the beginning of the season, so let's say you play Rudy Putek in the beginning of the season and you're 10-2. You're 10-2. You could have easily did what Missouri did in 2023 and play nobody worth the damn outside of the conference. The same with Ole Miss and play nobody worth the damn outside of the conference. LSU didn't do that. LSU has a massive test in week 1 versus Clemson, and everybody's anticipating that matchup. Now you add your schedule and everything that you have going on, and now going to Clemson in week 1. It's brutal. So I bring that all up to say, listen, if one thing that the SEC Media Days has taught me this week, more so, and pretty much where I was going into the season, if any of you have watched Ruffino and Joe show where we cover it from a national level, going into the season now, I am fully convinced that this is by far the deepest conference in the country. And I think that I don't know if any of these teams, with as talented as your conference is, can go undefeated. You know, I didn't talk about tier 3 or tier 4. Like, I think Arkansas is a tier 3 team. I think that Tennessee, Vandy, Oklahoma, Auburn are tier 3 football teams in the SEC. And when I look at them, guys, Vandy knocked off Bama a year ago. They're 3 points away from knocking off Texas. I think of Oklahoma with Arbuckle coming in as their offensive coordinator and John Mateer. Guys, dude, they get that thing fixed. Oklahoma is the team for me that could be in a tier 2 to tier 1 in a blink of an eye because of quarterback play. But you look at them going into the season and say, I don't know if they can get there because they've recruited really well along their defensive line. R. Mason Thomas returns. John Mateer and Arbuckle come in to try to revolutionize the Oklahoma offense. Guys, if that's a tier 3 team, if that is a team that is 7-5, 8-4, hell, even maybe pushing to 9-3 at the end of the year, they might not be one of the topper teams in the conference. But the difference in Oklahoma being 8-4 with their brutal schedule versus Nebraska's 8-4 record, it doesn't equal the same. Now, I say all this to say, and something I want to bring up. I've said this a lot, and I didn't do it live on AYS because we had a lot to do and we had a lot to talk about in reference to LSU and the baseball portal and everything that LSU had been doing. So we had a lot that we needed to get into this week, and we haven't really talked about this much. Commissioner Greg Sankey has run out there this week and said a lot of things about the playoff that clearly affects LSU. He's talked about the 8 or 9 game conference schedule. And I know on this channel, a good friend of mine and myself and Carter Bryant got in a pretty heated discussion about a 9 game to 8 game conference schedule. Guys, I fully agree with Commissioner Sankey on a couple of things for the future of college football, of where things stand. I do not agree, nor do I believe that college football should go to an AQ model. Now, for all of you that don't know what that means and what I'm talking about there, let me quickly explain. There is, for the new college football playoff format, in 14 to 16 teams, the AQ model, or the automatic qualifier, specifies that there are 4 teams from the Big Ten that will get in, 4 teams from the SEC that get in, 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Big 12, 1 at large, 1 from the group of 5, and then you have your field. That is your field. And then plus Notre Dame if they get in there. That would be your field. So you get to a place where only 4 teams from the Big Ten can get in, only 4 teams from the SEC can get in, where you look at the SEC in this given year and you hear Greg Sankey when he goes to the podium. Guys, I could make an argument right now that there could be 9 to 10 teams that, if things go the way that they want them to go, that have a realistic shot of getting into that playoff. Kirby Smart said this week. We want the best teams in the playoff. And I agree with him that we want the best teams in the playoff. And you look at strength of schedule, you look at strength of record. The Big Ten does not play that. And that is why the Big Ten has been massively pushing that they want automatic qualifiers, so that they know for a fact every single year that when there's a year that the SEC is not quote unquote down, that they can have 4 automatic teams into the playoff. I don't agree with that at all. The model that I think that works best for the SEC and the conference that, as LSU fans, that we are in, you got to go to the 5+11 model. And I don't even really like the 5+11 model. It's not my favorite. But the 5 conference champions and then plus 11 teams, meaning the best 11 teams in the field, should then be in the playoff. Because, guys, last year, I agree that you had a situation with teams like Indiana, SMU, Clemson, whoever, Arizona State, whoever it may be. Those teams did not belong. You know, listen, as humans and as people on earth, we all want equality in the sense of being human beings. That's what all of us strive to do every single day, is to fight for equality. The thing that I look at in sports that we've tried to do, that we've done such a horrible job of, is we're trying to fight for equality for other teams that don't belong, in the sense of, guys, there's no reason SMU should be in over Alabama or LSU or South Carolina from a year ago, or even Clemson, who is the ACC champion. Clemson last year lost to 3 SEC teams, one of them being South Carolina, and that happened on the field, and it meant nothing. So when you talk to me about 8 game conference schedule, when you talk to me about the playoff format, I want the best teams in the playoff. I don't want to go to a 9 conference game schedule because I don't think it's equal to the other conferences. You know, LSU has a brutal schedule this year where they play Bama, Florida, A&M, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Arkansas, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. That's 8. Now, let's say that you add a 9th conference game and you're not playing Kentucky or Mississippi State. Let's say that you play Georgia or Texas or Tennessee or Missouri. It is not equal on what you have to go through versus what the Big Ten goes through. You know, if I'm in the Big Ten, I would love to go up against UCLA, Rutgers, Northwestern, Michigan State, Purdue, Wisconsin. Guys, the bottom tier of the Big Ten is such a disarray and how horrible that they have been that I don't think that it is humanly possible for me to just look at a record and say, oh, well, you know what? That team's not better than the team that went 11-1 in the Big Ten when the team in the Big Ten only beat one team above 500. You know, I think of last year, some of the teams in the SEC. I think of South Carolina going 2-3 versus top 20, or 3-3, excuse me, 3-3 versus top 25 opponents. I think of Alabama going 4-1. I think of Ole Miss, who went 3-2 last year against top 25 opponents. When those teams are left out and strength of schedule is not a massive part of your playoff, this is why Greg Sankey all week at SEC Media Days has pushed for this, is because it is not created equally. It will. Sports are not a place for things that are equal. As we look at SEC Media Days, we look at the tiers of these teams. The three things in leaving this show that I would say, guys, I think that if you're a team in the SEC, you better buckle your chin strap up because it is going to be a brutal season. I think you're the deepest conference in the country. I think you got at least maybe 9 teams that right now could make the argument that they can make a push to the playoff. And before you say teams like Ole Miss and Missouri are not in that realm, guys, both of them won 10 games last season. They're a win away in the regular season for fighting for a playoff spot. Guys, Eli Drinkwitz has 3 straight seasons of 10 wins. 3. Can he make it a 4th? Is A&M on a trajectory with Mike Elko? Maybe you can make the argument there. And then the way that Florida ended the season a year ago. Guys, I think the SEC is going – if you were to expand, there's no way that 4 teams would be enough. And I don't think that these play-in games is what they're wanting to do if you do an AQ model. They amount to anything worth a damn. You're telling SEC teams that they got to play another game so that they could get into a playoff, even though going through a brutal schedule. I think that this week, for what it's worth, has been one of the more entertaining SEC Media Days because based off of what it's meant for the college football playoff, what it's meant for the game, for the conference games. If you go to 9, I am not a part of you going to 9 conference games. If you can't tell, I am a part of you staying where you are because I think it's too brutal already for some of these teams. Guys, next year, for what it's worth, there's a strong likelihood if LSU and Bama keep their rivalry that you face off against Texas, that you face off against Georgia. There's a chance you face off against Bama. There's a chance you face off against A&M. There's a chance you face off against Ole Miss. Some of those teams that you're facing off with, it's not equal on what you got to go through. So as we kind of start wrapping up SEC Media Days, I know that you and I have not been able to discuss this a lot, but I look at it from an LSU angle. Your schedule's so brutal right now. Guys, you right now with you facing off against South Carolina, Florida, Clemson, I'll throw in there, A&M, you have Oklahoma, you have all of these different teams. Guys, right now on your schedule, I'm just thinking this off the top of my head, you're right now going to face off against 7 ranked opponents going into the season. That is brutal, and nobody in the Big Ten has that on their schedule. All right. We were here with our good friends over at Service Hawk Digital Media, where they soar above the competition. Go see all of the great things that they're doing over at servicehawk.io. That's servicehawk.io to get all of the latest news and information from a marketing perspective. We'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good day. See y'all tonight. Peace out, Girl Scouts.